Every second, a silent battle is unfolding inside your body, and if billions of your cells stop listening, the damage could begin years before you ever notice. Right now, as you're listening to my voice, billions of tiny sugar molecules are rushing through the blood vessels inside your body. You can't feel them, you can't hear them, you probably haven't thought about them once today. And yet, whether those molecules reach the right destination or remain trapped in your bloodstream may quietly determine how well you see, how well you think, how long your kidneys function, and even how many healthy years you have left. I can't stop thinking about how strange that is. We spend so much time worrying about things we can see in the mirror, while one of the most important battles for our future health is happening completely out of sight. No pain, no alarm, no obvious warning, just countless microscopic decisions being made inside us every second. What fascinates me even more is that this invisible system is failing more people than ever before. More than 530 million adults are living with diabetes today, and the number continues to climb. Even after all the breakthroughs in medicine, biotechnology, and artificial intelligence, a disease driven largely by metabolism and lifestyle is still spreading across the world. Human DNA hasn't suddenly rewritten itself in a single generation, so something else must be changing. And that question kept pulling me deeper into the biology until I realized diabetes isn't really a story about sugar at all. It's a story about communication. Every meal you eat begins an extraordinary conversation inside your body. A piece of bread, a bowl of rice, an apple, or a handful of pasta is broken down into glucose, one of the most important fuels for human life. Within minutes, millions of glucose molecules enter your bloodstream, ready to power nearly 40 trillion cells. But here's the part one never truly appreciated until I started exploring physiology. Those cells can't simply reach out and grab the fuel they desperately need. They wait patiently for a signal, a tiny chemical messenger that tells them the energy has arrived. When that message is heard, life moves forward with astonishing precision. Muscles contract, neurons fire, organs perform millions of tasks without hesitation. But what happens when little by little, trillions of cells stop listening? That single question leads us into one of the most remarkable, misunderstood, and surprisingly hopeful stories in modern biology. If the story of diabetes is really a story about communication, then we have to meet the tiny organ responsible for delivering one of the most important messages in the human body. I've always found it amazing that an organ most people never think about quietly influences almost every second of their lives. Hidden behind the stomach lies the pancreas, an organ that never asks for attention but constantly earns it. Part of it helps digest every meal we eat, releasing enzymes that break food into usable pieces. But another small collection of cells performs a job that feels almost impossible. It watches the chemistry of your blood every moment of every day and decides exactly when to act. Those specialized beta cells produce insulin, a hormone so small that it's easy to overlook, yet without it the entire metabolic system begins to lose its rhythm. I like to imagine every cell in the body as a house with its lights turned off, patiently waiting for energy. Glucose is already outside, ready to enter, but the doors remain closed until insulin arrives and knocks. The moment the signal is recognized, hidden transport channels move into position, glucose flows inside, and what looked like an ordinary molecule suddenly becomes movement, memory, thought, warmth, and life itself. The elegance of that process is what keeps pulling me back to biology. The body rarely relies on force. Instead, it relies on communication so precise that trillions of independent cells behave like members of the same perfectly synchronized orchestra. And that is exactly why diabetes fascinates me. In type 1 diabetes, the orchestra loses its conductor. An autoimmune attack gradually destroys the beta cells, leaving the body unable to produce enough insulin. The message simply never arrives, even though glucose continues to circulate through the bloodstream. Type 2 diabetes tells an even stranger story. the messenger is still there, knocking on billions of cellular doors, but those doors slowly become less willing to respond. The pancreas keeps sending stronger and stronger signals, trying desperately to preserve balance, while the problem quietly grows beneath the surface. The more I study this system, the more I realize that disease often doesn't begin with dramatic failure. Sometimes it begins with a conversation that slowly fades until the body can no longer hear itself. And once that conversation begins to fade, the body does something that I think is both heartbreaking and extraordinary. It fights quietly to protect you long before you ever realize anything is wrong. One of the biggest surprises I discovered while learning about metabolism is that type 2 diabetes doesn't usually appear overnight. It unfolds like a slow-moving story that can take years, sometimes even decades, before anyone notices the ending approaching. At first, the cells simply become a little less responsive to insulin. The signal is still arriving, but it no longer carries the same influence it once did. Instead of giving up, the pancreas responds with remarkable determination. It produces more insulin, then even more, pushing harder to maintain the balance that keeps every organ functioning normally. For a while, it succeeds. Blood sugar may still look perfectly healthy on a routine test. A person may feel energetic, go to work every day, exercise on weekends, and believe nothing unusual is happening. Beneath that ordinary life, however, millions of beta cells are working overtime, compensating for a problem that remains completely invisible. The more I think about it, the more this feels like one of biology's most profound lessons. Our bodies are incredibly loyal. They absorb stress, adapt to change, and sacrifice their own reserves just to keep us feeling normal for as long as possible. But every adaptation has a limit. Eventually, the constant demand begins to exhaust the insulin-producing cells. They can no longer keep pace with the growing resistance. Blood glucose starts creeping higher, first into pre-diabetic ranges, and then into diabetes itself. What makes this stage so unsettling is its silence. There may be no dramatic symptoms, no sharp pain, no obvious warning that something fundamental has shifted inside the body. That realization completely changed the way I think about health. Instead of asking whether someone has diabetes, I find myself wondering how hard their metabolism is working just to create the illusion of normality. Because sometimes, the most dangerous diseases aren't the ones that attack suddenly. They're the ones that patiently evolve in the background while we mistake compensation for health, quietly rewriting our biology one ordinary day at a time. And when the body's remarkable ability to compensate finally reaches its limit, the real consequences begin to reveal themselves in places we would never expect. What changed my perspective the most was realizing that glucose is not the villain of this story. Every thought, every heartbeat, every step we take depends on it. The problem begins only when that fuel lingers in the wrong place for far too long, turning a life-sustaining molecule into a source of slow and relentless damage. I picture the circulatory system as an immense network of rivers carrying nutrients to every corner of the body. Under healthy conditions, those rivers flow smoothly, nourishing billions of cells without interruption. But when blood sugar remains chronically elevated, the delicate inner lining of those vessels starts to suffer. The damage is microscopic at first, almost impossible to notice, yet it gradually spreads through nearly every organ. The tiny vessels inside the eyes become vulnerable, threatening one of our most precious senses. The kidneys, which filter enormous volumes of blood every single day, begin losing the precision that keeps our internal environment stable. Even the nerves are affected twice over, receiving less healthy blood flow while also being exposed to excess glucose, leading to numbness, tingling, or the gradual disappearance of sensation itself. As I dug deeper into the biology, another discovery completely overturned something I had always assumed. Body fat is not simply stored energy waiting to be burned. It behaves like a biologically active tissue, constantly sending chemical messages throughout the body. Visceral fat, the fat surrounding internal organs, is especially influential because it releases inflammatory signals and adipokines that interfere with normal insulin communication. It doesn't just sit there, it actively participates in metabolic dysfunction. That insight also explains why consistent movement is so powerful. No exercise can magically target visceral fat alone, yet regular physical activity changes the entire metabolic environment. Contracting muscles are able to absorb glucose efficiently, and afterward they become even more responsive to insulin. The body begins rebuilding healthier communication pathways one workout at a time. To me, that's the hidden beauty of human physiology. Even while disease quietly reshapes the body is quietly searching for every possible opportunity to heal itself. And perhaps that's the most hopeful realization of all. The same biology that allows disease to develop is often the very biology that gives us a chance to change its course. Before I started exploring how metabolism really works, I assumed diabetes followed a simple path that could only move in one direction. Once it appeared, I imagined the story was already written, but the deeper I looked into the science, the more I realized the human body is far more adaptable than I ever appreciated. For people living with type 1 diabetes, insulin remains an essential lifeline because the cells responsible for producing it have been destroyed by an autoimmune process. Modern medicine has transformed countless lives through insulin therapy, allowing millions to manage a condition that would otherwise be fatal. It is a remarkable reminder of what science can accomplish when it understands biology. Type 2 diabetes, however, tells a more flexible story. The same lifestyle patterns that gradually contribute to insulin resistance can often be reshaped through consistent movement, balanced nutrition, weight management, and, when appropriate, medications such as metformin, GLP-1 receptor agonists, SGLT2 inhibitors, or insulin under medical guidance. None of these approaches are magic, but together they help restore healthier communication between cells and the metabolic signals that guide them. One idea continues to stay with me. The medical community rarely uses the word cure. Instead, experts often speak about remission. At first, that distinction sounded disappointing, but I now see it differently. Remission acknowledges both the incredible resilience of the body and the reality that our biology reflects the choices and conditions we experience over time. Maybe that is the most profound lesson hidden inside the science of diabetes. Our bodies are never static. Every meal influences metabolism. Every walk activates muscles that eagerly absorb glucose. Every night of quality sleep, every workout, and every healthier decision sends millions of tiny biological messages that accumulate over months and years. Understanding diabetes isn't about living in fear of sugar or obsessing over numbers on a laboratory report. It's about recognizing that beneath our ordinary routines exists an extraordinary system constantly fighting for balance. And perhaps the greatest privilege we have is realizing that, through informed choices and consistent habits, we can become active participants in that quiet conversation instead of passive observers of its outcome. The more I learn about biology, the more I realize that health is rarely shaped by one dramatic decision. Instead, it is built through thousands of quiet choices that either strengthen or weaken the conversations happening inside our cells every single day. Diabetes reminds us that the body is constantly adapting, protecting, and trying to maintain balance, often long before we notice anything is wrong. The lesson is simple but powerful. Don't wait for symptoms to start caring about your metabolism. Move your body, eat mindfully, prioritize sleep, and give your biology the conditions it needs to thrive. Small habits repeated consistently can create extraordinary changes over time. Now I'd love to hear from you. What is one healthy habit you're committed to improving this week? Please share your answer in the comments so everyone can learn from each other's ideas and experiences. And if you enjoyed exploring the incredible science behind the human body, don't forget to subscribe and join our community. Your support inspires us to keep creating more fascinating stories that help us all better understand ourselves.